for some more context here, we're joined live by criminal defense attorney Mark Reichel. Mark, let's just begin here. This obviously not a surprise to you. Just 2 weeks ago, you, of course, said that you did think that this was going to come down as a guilty verdict. So what is your reaction?
You know, I saw this coming. I really didn't have that many questions or concerns about it. I mean, it wasn't that difficult of a case, to be honest with you. And I also think the defense didn't do a good job, okay? I think in the months to come, people are going to realize that. I think what they did was the big mistake here, which is the same thing that caused the crime, is they listened to their client. They listened to former President Trump on how to do the defense. I think they did the crime originally was committed because everyone listened to, President Trump, he wanted to be the president at the time. So, there's not a lot of scientific thought that goes into some of these things. And I think the way the defense did the trial was the same way. They made a lot of mistakes.
So when we're talking about the conviction now, obviously sentencing happening a little over a month from now, what are some of the practical implications of what could happen here for the former president?
Well, what's interesting is he's going around constantly berating the judge, berating the jury, berating the legal system. And he's also getting a lot of, there's a lot of national attention from governors like Ron DeSantis in Florida and Governor Abbott in Texas saying, well, come here, we'll shield you. We won't make them bring you back. You can stay here and, we'll defeat the other state if they want to put you in jail or something. So as a result, when he comes back for sentencing on July 11th, I think the prosecution may mention that and say, look, Your Honor, you have to remand this guy to do some jail time because he's not going to do it. He's going to thumb his nose at the system and he's going to seek refuge in some of these other states.
So you're saying there the prosecution, of course, will let the judge know they think he should serve jail time for this. But what are some of the other factors? I mean, it's such an unprecedented case, the first time in history where a U.S. president has been convicted of these felony counts. So what are some other things the judge is going to consider when sentencing comes?
Well, I think what the judge is going to try to do is pretend like it's just not the former president or a guy who's running for president. I think he's going to try to sentence him so that no one is above the law, so that the law is applied evenly. I mean, there's one thing that's uniquely American is our desire to fulfill the promise that the law applies equally to everyone. So I think he's going to try to just move out of the equation, take off the table the fact this is somebody running for president. Say, let me take a look at his age. Has he ever committed a crime before? How long ago did this crime happen? Was it a crime of violence? These are the things you look at before you determine whether to put somebody in jail. This is a case that could absolutely require some jail time if it was anyone else. It could also end up with straight probation and no jail time if it was anyone else. But one of the factors that the judge also has to consider, okay, is what's called remorse or acceptance of responsibility, because it leads us to believe you will now follow the law. It loses its normative effect. Okay, the law just is improperly applied if the defendant, once convicted, says, I'm not going to abide by it because I don't think I'm truly guilty. So to get a good sentence after you've been convicted, you normally have to have acceptance of responsibility so that we think you won't do it again. So that's something that I don't think you're going to see in July. And therefore, the judge is going to say, wow, if this was just any other defendant before me who said, I did nothing wrong, I don't care if I've been convicted, to say, well, maybe, I do have to go to the higher end of all the options I have and select incarceration.
Yeah, taking accountability, let alone ensuring that you won't do it in the future, is not something that we have seen in the past. You mentioned in the beginning that this case, you didn't think that the defense did a great job by listening to their clients. So what are some things, in your opinion, that could have been done differently here on the defense's part?
I think they really lost all credibility when they basically denied there was ever a scheme or it was concocted, because there's just no dispute that catch and kill was designed. Why would David Pecker come in and say that if it wasn't true? And there's documents which support it. So when they came in and said there was never such a scheme, I think they lost credibility, and all they could say, their defense was then limited to one thing. Okay, so what if they proved there was a scheme? The prosecution proved there was a scheme. It was to get me elected president, but I had nothing to do with it. That's a terrible defense. I think the jury will be instructed. It's a courtroom. If you don't like the law, change the law, but the law requires it to be a false entry. I would have went at the top of the charges, at the top of the indictment, and said this was not a false entry. He wrote legal fees, okay? Sure, it was payment for settlement to Stormy Daniels, but it's settlement of a claim. I'm an attorney. I pay off things for my clients all the time. They reimburse me. They send me a check. It says, legal fees on it. I think if I was doing it, I would have not let Mr. Trump control any of this. I wouldn't have gone after the character or credibility of witnesses. I would have said, what did he do so wrong? Yep, sure, he was paying. They were paying her off, and he wrote legal fees on the checks. That was the crime, is they're saying, by putting the legal fees on there, he knew it wasn't legal fees. Boy, I would have hammered there and at least created reasonable doubt. And I'm not just, blowing up my own talents. I'm just saying, looking at it, mathematically, that was the weakest of the elements to convict the guy on.
So how much of President Trump running for president and trying to maybe salvage a reputation, I'm not sure at this point, how much of that factored into the defense not just admitting to Trump paying those legal fees and calling it what it is?
Yes, I think absolutely. I think the problem is he's running to be president. So you can't let people who say negative things about you go, unimpeached. You have to fight back. So when they come in and say things that, in the courtroom that don't put you in a favorable light, if you're running for president, you got to fight back against those. But if they don't prove your guilt on anything, I would then say, hey, it's the other side. They couldn't prove me guilty on something, so instead they attacked my credibility. That shows how weak their argument is. Stuff like that they didn't do.
So just kind of final question here. What's next for former President Trump in this? What are your thoughts?
Well, they're going to have some very, very difficult decisions, I think, in the next couple of weeks about what to do at sentencing, because there's a chance he could be sentenced to jail unless he comes in and said, I was wrong and I did wrong and I apologize, and I'm going to go out there and be a better president next time. I think then the judge would consider not putting him in jail, but otherwise they have a real tough decision. I think he may consider withdrawing from the nomination, but that's my view.
Interesting. All right. Thanks so much, Mark Reichel, joining us. We appreciate your time.
Riley, thank you for having me.